Matt, I'm going to name this one a year ago. You really said well, sir.
We are at a very interesting point. Almost going back to the previous answer, I think there is a genuine desire. However, if we just look at even material compliance right now, material compliance, our current standards are written around non-bio products. We are all used to dealing in products that are made out of steel. Our designers, our standards, our regulation is built around non-bio products, and therefore I think there's a whole drive that we need to undertake as an industry and from government body to align with genuine sustainable products. I think modularity is absolutely a fundamental requirement in the way that we move forward, and people create creativity. You know, whilst we are a mature industry, we need to draw in new talent, young people that are used to working with different material compositions, and taking us away from what, as an industry, we're used to doing in terms of hard drawn and steel materials. So I think there's a combination of things, but it's basically around not thinking about historical design trends and being open to using new materials that won't pass current standards, because some of the standards aren't really relevant to creating products for today's needs with an ESG in mind.
Donna, do you want to?
Well, I mean, completely agree. I think it is a complete change in the way that we design, and that modularity, I think, is so important. And that has benefits not just, all the way down, doesn't it? Fewer components, easier to control, easier to trace and manage. And talking about that across the range, one of the biggest challenges that we face is what we do with a legacy product. When you've got a large product range, how do you start to deal with legacy? Because at some point we just got to stop saying, well, we're going to do that on a new product, because that's nice and easy to design that in. But actually, how do we deal with the current offering?
I think it's a really, really important point, because and some of it's my fault, all the stuff about circular economy was 1066. But Simon was talking brilliantly about recycling his swarf. Now we have to remember that we were the head of the conversation was about 2030, and there's a huge amount of products out there being used in the space, and they weren't designed to be circular.
No.
And we talk about recycling. There is a huge role for recycling of getting that back, unscribbing stuff.
Yeah.
So the mindset is a bit boring, actually, going there, recovering stuff and getting somebody to take it apart properly rather than just throwing it out. But you also talk about cost. I'm minded, if you remember Dame Judith Hackett, her report on Grenfell Town, she said value engineering, but nothing to do with value and nothing to do with what a brilliant comment. So will people pay? I'm going to the whole floor will pay for sustainability, or will they soon?
Well, they'll have to understand. People have to really understand what sustainability is. That's the starting point. What is sustainability? Because in people's minds, it's different things. I think that you need to reinforce the three things. You need to reinforce societal sustainability, which is all about people and the way they are. You got to talk about economic sustainability, which is about profit and investment. You need to understand that to invest in new technology and new materials, you need to make a profit.
Yeah.
And thirdly, is the environmental thing. That's the offshoot. But I think for me, importantly, we only ever put lights in anywhere for people, regardless of UGRs and CRIs and any of that nonsense. We put light buildings for people fundamentally. And if you want technologies that move it forward and you want those types of things to increase and grow, then we have to understand that these things cost more. until they get to a point where they're a standardized process.
Neil, you're coming from a controls point of view. Pick up from that.
One of the bits that stood out to me was Dora's comment about modularity. She mentioned some of the benefits that she sees and kind of managing components and supply chain and things. But there are other big benefits that come from modularity in circular discussion. So the greater ease for repair, for replacement, for upgrade, circular or modularity makes that a much
And
more,
also choice as well, because I think, we're in decorative lighting, interior designers, they don't want to keep the same product forever. But it'd be much better for them if we had a modular approach to replace part of the product rather than the whole product.
But if that's something you've been intrinsically doing, both you and Dave, you build the next fitting by using parts of old, or is that being unfair?
No, look, to an extent, and I think this actually builds back into the point that you were making about recycling. And I think we do a very poor job when you look at traditional luminaires. And I have stuff that's in my catalogue that's very similar to product of the business that I was with 25 years ago. A lot of this doesn't change because people are putting them into the same properties. They've not built a different size house, and it's the same arrangement. And in most cases, you're talking about a steel structure with a lamp holder and a bit of electric string, and they come along and they plug a light bulb into it. And for the majority of consumers in domestic, that's the case. And in terms of actually being able to recycle that product, it should be straightforward. It's very simple mechanical construction to that product. But I don't think we do. I think, it has a tendency to end up shredded and, they reclaim a relatively small percentage of that. And I think that's a real crying shame. And this is one of the difficulties I think we have as an industry because, yes, absolutely. Modular approach is suited to certain aspects of it, but when you're putting a scheme in for let's say a hospitality client, for example, they're not necessarily what they want is something that creates the look that they want. And our product spends as much time, in fact, more time, not illuminated than illuminated, and we spend so much time talking about office environments and commercial environments. And Neil's quite right. Controls in those scenarios are something that should be mandated strongly and should be enforced. And enforcement is something that I will definitely come back on later on. But, we have this, why do we insist on, for example, integrated LED luminaires for consumers and domestic properties? Because in most cases, what's that adding to the consumer's experience? They want something that looks nice when it's switched off. Now, yes, at the contemporary end, but what proportion of the housing stock would actually suit that contemporary look? You want something that's a more traditional J-arm chandelier. And again, things are actually very easy to maintain. You're not talking about separate drivers and control gear in there. Something that a consumer understands. They understand that when one of those lights goes out, they can unscrew that bulb and they can put another one in. And I think they've overcome that barrier. Again, we had that horrible position where CFL did so much damage to the impression of being ecologically friendly. But I think people have kind of embraced LED as a light source, as a replaceable lamp. But in most cases, to me, that's perhaps the most environmentally friendly way of doing it, is giving them a traditional, steel structure with a lamp holder with a easily replaceable light source, without designing a dedicated module for it, stuff that is already understood by the majority of our consumer base.
Does that bring to us sort of another point that Matt touched on it? It's about young great ideas and materials, and Donna and Sarah talk about having the right language set, but pace of change. Are we guilty of just inventing so much new stuff that we can't fix old stuff, and everything, we're running so fast we'll never catch up with us?
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
I also think it's worth making the point that I think the marketplace thinks that we're more mature in sustainability than we are. I get that feeling. When in reality, we all know there are bits of our catalogues that we made. So in the past, we used to make things not come apart. They were glued, bonded, they were welded, everything was made to last as long as it could. The thought process now is that you design it for it to come apart. So it's a complete step change. But with that comes this idea that we're not as far down this road as the market thinks we are. I get that feeling.
It's interesting. I completely agree. I am sure that to a large extent we've created that impression, and not without good reason, because in certain aspects of sustainability we have been fantastic. As you mentioned earlier, the huge improvement in data and efficiency that we've seen. So our industry has been driving, maybe originally or maybe early on, more from a energy saving and cost saving perspective, but has been driving aspects of, and miniaturization was another part of it. So we were driving elements of sustainability really well, and we made a lot of noise about it. And created the impression, this can be a challenge with regulators as well, but in the area I work in, where we've created such an impression, such a good history of doing so well in things like energy improvements. It's anticipated you can keep doing it. So I'm sure we've created a rod for our own back, but I also completely agree there are elements of sustainability, the new parts, such as the metrics that we've been speaking about a lot, where we're on a journey, and the assumption is that we're here and we're probably not quite there yet. And some companies are further forward than others, but we're on a journey. So
Clear. Can I then ask another question for those people in the commercial sector? How do you, and you said this question about people think we're further than they are, but how do we stack up against other business services?
Well, hugely better. Hugely better.
Because we've been talking about 1066. I'm out, at the subsidiary meeting in Brussels next week, where we start to teach them how we're going to have to teach the people doing 1066 for chillers how to do it. The lighters are teaching the aircon people, because they don't get how to do circular economy, and we do. That's fine, scrap providing. But that also, maybe that's another thing. We talk about European global policy and regulations. If we have building-wide regulations, that increases the take-up of the metrics. Good point.
Talking about white, I think that's one of the, for us, one of the areas that's most important too. It's really interesting in control. So if you look at component level assessments in controls, you can be misguided choosing the right product. If you do an EPD, for example, on any controls component, compare it to a light switch, a conventional light switch like the thing on the wall there, this device will, when you do a component to component assessment, this device will look worse. You have to choose the boundary rate for your assessment. You have to look at. If you do the assessment, and you can do this, if you do the assessment at building level, then you'll see that actually the controls are fantastically successful at improving the whole not just the energy, but the whole sustainability footprint for the building. So
I think the same is also true of domestic. I think domestically we could move things forward a lot better than we have done. I know you're saying about the bit of string in the ball puller, which is fine. But in reality, wouldn't it be brilliant if you could walk into a room and the room knew you were there and turned the light on, or knew that the blinds were open and there was enough light coming in and didn't bring the light on, or vice versa? We can do that, right?
yeah, sure.
Okay, but I don't think the marketplace understands exactly what is or isn't possible and at what level that things should be at. Home automation's always been one of those things. Look, I'm very, very good at it in the 80s when I was working in theatre line. But I think what we need to get across is that everybody has a part to play in this. But again, I'll go back to the phrase I used at the beginning, which is we in the UK we've always done it this way.
Hold that thought. Apart from the fact that there's me sort of fully paid up tree hugger, head of policy and sustainability at LIA. Can I get my son to turn the lights off? So if you can do an upgrade to a teenager, then Good luck with that.